So how does it happen? How does a young nation, a country that seems to be in perfect balance, just completely tear itself apart? Well, today, we're going to unravel those 4 decades of tension, of broken promises, and the radical moments that pushed the United States right into the Civil War. Okay, so picture this. It's 1819, and the United States has 22 states. 11 of them are free states, and 11 are slave states. It's a perfect 50-50 split, a delicate balance of power in Congress. But, just under the surface of that harmony, this massive conflict was brewing, and it was about to shatter that peace. So the big question is, what on earth happened? To really get to the why, you first have to understand the who. And back in the early 1800s, America was, for all intents and purposes, 2 totally different countries that just happened to share a border. They had completely opposite ways of life. And the divide was just stark. You had the North, which was industrializing. Its economy was all about factories, manufacturing. It was fueled by immigrant labor from places in Europe that had already outlawed slavery. So this gave people in the North the room to see slavery as a moral crusade, a profound evil. But then you look at the South. The economy there was almost 100% agricultural, literally built on the backs of enslaved people. And when the cotton gin was invented, it only made slave labor even more profitable and, in their view, absolutely necessary. So here's the bottom line. For the North, getting rid of slavery was a moral crusade. For the South, it was a direct threat to their entire economy. There was just no middle ground. So this fundamental disagreement, it turned into a political powder keg, especially as America started expanding to the West. Every single time a new territory wanted to become a state, it set off this ferocious battle. Was it going to be free, or was it going to be slave? The fight for the nation's soul really came down to a fight for political power. For decades, Congress just kept trying to put a Band-Aid on this, with one fragile compromise after another. The first big one was the Missouri Compromise of 1820. They drew a literal line in the sand across the country. Slavery was allowed below it, but banned above it. But of course, as America got bigger, that solution just couldn't last. When Texas was annexed, it ripped that wound right open again, which led to the Compromise of 1850. And this one introduced a really dangerous new idea called popular sovereignty. Basically, let the settlers in the new territories vote on it themselves. This all came to a head with the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, which just tore up that old Missouri Compromise line for good. And the result of that decision? It was immediate, and it was violent. Instead of some peaceful democratic vote, popular sovereignty turned Kansas into an actual war zone. You had pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers flooding into the territory, not just to cast a ballot, but to fight. This whole period, which we now call Bleeding Kansas, was like a horrifying sneak preview of the Civil War. The political debate was officially over, and the violence had begun. After Bleeding Kansas, any real chance for a peaceful solution was just fading away fast, and a series of events in the late 1850s, one after another, would push the nation right past the point of no return. It was like a domino effect. First, the Fugitive Slave Act, which forced Northerners to actually participate in slavery by returning escaped people. This, you can imagine, enraged them. Then, the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision came down, which basically said that African Americans weren't citizens and had 0 rights. It was a stunning blow to the abolitionist cause. In response, a radical abolitionist named John Brown tried to start a massive slave uprising with his raid on Harper's Ferry. And the final political straw? The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. He won the presidency without a single Southern electoral vote, which sent a crystal-clear message to the South: your political power on the national stage is over. So what did the South do in response to Lincoln's election? Well, South Carolina voted unanimously to leave the Union. In their own declaration, they said, "A geographical line has been drawn across the Union. 10 other states would soon follow, forming the Confederate States of America." The fracture was now official. With the country now officially split in 2, it was really only a matter of time before this political division boiled over into open warfare. And the flashpoint for all of it would be a small, isolated federal fort in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Now, if you looked at this on paper, you'd think it was no contest at all. The Union had more than double the people, double the railroad tracks, and was producing something like 90% of all manufactured goods. The North had every single material advantage. But the South? They believed their superior military leaders and the simple advantage of fighting on their home turf could win them the war. The standoff started right here, at Fort Sumter. It was one of the very last pieces of federal property still in the hands of the Union inside the new Confederacy. The fort was undermanned, running low on supplies, and completely surrounded by thousands of Confederate troops demanding that they surrender. The Union commander refused, so the bombardment began. At 4:30 in the morning on April 12, 1861, the very first shot of the Civil War was fired. For 34 straight hours, Confederate cannons just pounded the fort. Finally, with the fort literally on fire and its flagpole shot down, the Union garrison surrendered. And here's just a surreal little detail from that day. As the first battle of America's bloodiest war kicked off, citizens in Charleston actually climbed up onto their roofs to watch the show. It was a spectacle, a monumental event. Nobody could have possibly imagined the 4 years of absolute horror that were about to follow. The fall of Fort Sumter lit a fire under both sides. President Lincoln immediately called for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. The war was on, and both sides started drawing up their plans for what they were sure would be a quick, decisive conflict. So the North's big strategy was called the Anaconda Plan. It's a great name, right? The idea was to literally squeeze the Confederacy to death. They've used the Union's powerful navy to blockade all the southern ports, cutting off their trade, and at the same time, they'd capture the Mississippi River to split the Confederacy right in half. So the Union plan was super aggressive. Strangle, divide, and then make a quick, lightning strike on the Confederate capital in Richmond, Virginia. The Confederacy's plan, on the other hand, was the total opposite. They wanted to fight a defensive war, make any invasion so costly and so bloody that the North would just get tired and give up. And they were also hoping that a foreign power like Great Britain, who was desperate for Southern cotton, might just step in and help them out. Both sides were just filled with this fatal optimism. They really believed that one big, glorious battle would decide the whole thing. And that battle was going to be fought just outside Washington, D.C., along a little stream called Bull Run. It would shatter every single illusion that anyone had about this war. And once again, the scene was just almost festive. As the main Union army marched out of Washington, civilians started following them with picnic baskets. They were ready to watch a glorious victory. The whole atmosphere was just one of unwavering excitement, like a day trip to the countryside to watch a little rebellion get crushed. What they saw instead was a total disaster. The huge but very inexperienced Union Army completely fumbled its complicated battle plan. Confederate reinforcements showed up just in the nick of time. A little-known general named Thomas Jackson stood his ground like a stone wall and got himself a legendary nickname. And when the Confederates charged with that terrifying rebel yell, the Union line just completely collapsed. What started as an orderly retreat turned into a panicked, chaotic rout, with soldiers and those picnicking civilians fleeing for their lives all the way back to Washington. It was a catastrophic and deeply, deeply embarrassing defeat for the North. So that illusion of a short, glorious war, it was gone, replaced by the grim reality of a humiliating defeat. The nation was more broken than ever. And after the shock of Bull Run, the one question hanging over everyone's head was, how could this broken Union possibly ever be put back together again?